Hidden high in the Himalayas is a valley carved by water. In just 30 miles, there are 17 extraordinary waterfalls and 114 pristine lakes of astonishing colors. Supersaturated with minerals, the water creates submerged sculptures, thousands of years in the making. The valley is so isolated, the people have developed their own unique Tibetan culture, in which flowing water represents the soul of Geological. An enchanted valley buried deep in the land of the dragon. Cradled at the foot of the Himalayas, on the highest plateau on the planet, is a land of mist and mountains, where, according to legend, an enchanted valley was created by gods in love. It's said a young mountain god once adored a beautiful sky goddess. To show his devotion, he made her a gift worthy of her beauty. It was a shining mirror, polished by the clouds and wind. Unfortunately, the mirror slipped through her fingers, and the shattered fragments fell to earth, where they formed 114 crystal clear lakes, set like jewels in a mountain valley. In China today, they have a saying: if there is a heaven on earth, that will be Geological. Which is why the extraordinary lakes have become one of China's top tourist destinations. But for thousands of years, few people knew the place even existed. Buried in the mountainous heart of China, the entire national park covers just 278 square miles, about the same area as New York City. Surrounded by forest-covered mountains, lakes at the top of the valley sit more than 10,000 feet above sea level. But in Geological, not all water rests in tranquil lakes. In just 30 miles, the valley descends 6,000 feet, which means water moves quickly down the mountain. The local Tibetans believe flowing water is the soul of Geological. In addition to the 114 lakes, there are 47 springs, 11 rapids, 5 shoals, and 17 extraordinary waterfalls. There's a popular saying in China: once you've seen Geological, there's no need to see any other water. No wonder this enchanted valley is a favorite location for feature film directors, including Ang Lee and his Academy Award-winning Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. One part of the Gio Valley squeezes more than 40 lakes into only 9 miles. And there's still room for the widest waterfall in China. This extraordinary landscape was created by water and ice. Over millions of years, massive glaciers gouged the Gio Valley out of solid rock. When the rivers of ice retreated, they left behind the characteristic U-shaped valley walls familiar to visitors to Yosemite, which just happens to be the Enchanted Valley's sister park in America. But unlike Yosemite, which is carved from solid granite, the bedrock of Gio is limestone. Because 230 million years ago, this region was sitting at the bottom of a subtropical sea. The rocks of the Enchanted Valley contain fossilized remains of ancient corals and sea creatures, now lifted 8,000 feet above sea level. That's because 55 million years ago, India collided with Asia, forcing up the Himalayan mountain range. As the rock is pushed ever higher, water and ice eat away at the limestone, carving an imposing landscape of deep valleys and massive peaks. The aptly named Sword Rock slices 1,600 feet into the sky. As an icon of Gio, it's hard to believe that less than 40 years ago, the Chinese government knew nothing of the massive peak or the Enchanted Valley. The Gio Valley is incredibly remote. Even today, it's a 10-hour bus ride from the nearest city. Once, the only link to the outside world was a horse trail through the vast mountain wilderness. But this all changed in the 1960s, when logging gangs climbed into the valley in search of timber. In 1975, hearing rumors of a primeval paradise, the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry sent in a team to explore the logging potential of the valley. When confronted by such magnificent scenery, they fell to their knees in open-mouthed wonder. And the valley wasn't just full of trees. It was a sanctuary for wildlife. There are more than 140 species of birds, and squirrels are common. Far more elusive are two of China's most treasured endangered species: giant pandas and the equally rare golden snub-nosed monkey. Tiny populations still survive here thanks to the extreme isolation and the pristine forest that survives in the valley. More than 50% of Geological is covered in ancient trees. It's called primeval forest because the groves of tall timber were spared the logging of neighboring valleys. First, the locals worked hard to prevent the logging, and soon the Chinese government stepped in to help. In 1982, Geological Valley became a national park, and the forest was protected forever. Now, the government is actively replanting vast areas in the park and surrounding mountains, where once there were only scarred hillsides and blackened stumps. Today, it's not trees, but water that brings most visitors to the Enchanted Valley. And the highest, deepest, and largest alpine lake is so big, the locals called it a sea. Half a million years ago, a huge rockfall blocked the top of the Geological Valley, and water backed up behind the dam, creating a lake 4.5 miles long, but only 500 yards wide. The locals called it the Long Sea, because for Tibetans, living 1,000 miles from the nearest ocean, this lake was the equivalent of the Pacific. It never overflows in even the heaviest rains and never dries up, even in the severest drought. There's no outlet. The water simply drains away through cracks and fissures in the limestone.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen, all for free. No subscription required.
Vast quantities of water travel beneath Geological in subterranean river systems, occasionally emerging again in one of the 47 freshwater springs found in the valley. Once back above ground, the water's progress down the mountainside is halted by a series of stone dams. Some of the 114 lakes in the valley are the result of earthquakes, which rupture the limestone, sending massive rock falls to block the flow. Other lakes formed behind dams made of rubble, left by retreating Ice Age glaciers. Some pools are broad and shallow, filled with reeds and grasses, a magnet for migratory birds. But most ponds are filled with crystal clear water and astonishing colors. Algae and sand on the bottom reflect light of different wavelengths, generating a multitude of dazzling colors. The water is so cold that fallen trees decay very slowly. Their ghostly skeletons are preserved forever in a shroud of white limestone. When rainwater seeps through leaves and soil, it picks up carbon dioxide, which turns water into carbonic acid. The acid reacts with limestone, dissolving the bedrock and releasing calcium into the water. Eventually, the ponds become so supersaturated with calcium, it starts sticking to anything in the water. Over time, a coating of limestone rock forms around the sand, stones, and submerged trees. The dissolved calcium also makes the water intensely blue. But local Tibetans have an alternative explanation. All the pools have colorful names like Double Dragon Lake and Peacock River, each a reminder of an ancient legend. Many of the lakes and rivers are named after the spirits that live there, whether mermaid or monster. The water of Rhinoceros Lake is remembered for its health-giving properties. According to legend, a long time ago, a Tibetan priest once rode into Geological on the back of his rhinoceros. He was seriously ill, on the verge of death. And then he drank from a spring that flowed into a lake. Miraculously, he was cured. And from that day forth, he regularly returned to drink from the waters of the lake that now bear the name of his rhinoceros. Other strange animals have been seen throughout the Enchanted Valley. Dragons are said to be common. At the bottom of this lake is a collection of calcified stones the locals believe is the body of a yellow dragon. When a light breeze ripples the surface of the water, it's said the dragon's body can be seen writhing in the depths of the lake. In Geological, the one animal seldom seen is a fish. High in the Himalayas, everything freezes in winter. The only fish that manages to survive is the songpan naked carp. Naked because it doesn't have any scales. The small and curious carp gather in large numbers when a leaf or pebble falls into the lake. In the cold alpine water, the fish are small and extremely slow growing, taking at least 7 years to reach maturity. The Tibetan named other lakes after animals that are much harder to see. Once, the shores of several lakes were surrounded by bamboo groves, the perfect habitat for giant panda. At Panda Lake, the cuddly giants used to drink and play, but none have been seen for many years. Once there were tigers in the mountains around Geological. It's said they drank from the waters of Tiger Lake. Although some believe the name comes from deciduous trees on the shore. In fall, when the leaves change color, the reflections of the trees were said to resemble the stripes of the tiger. But not everything in the Enchanted Valley is serene and tranquil. When water picks up speed, it deposits more calcium on the rocks. So in this strange land, the waterfalls keep on growing until they're 1,000 feet wide and over 10,000 years old. In Geological Valley, there are 17 extraordinary waterfalls. Most waterfalls are worn away by the pounding water. But in this enchanted land, the waterfalls are growing bigger. As the calcium-rich water spills over the top, it leaves behind a layer of calcium carbonate. Slowly, very slowly, the layers thicken into an ever larger wall of limestone. Some of the falls have been growing since the last ice age. In most places, a raging torrent will strip all plants from the rocks around a waterfall. But here in the Enchanted Valley, the limestone cliffs are covered in living trees, creating very rare forest waterfalls. Something equally remarkable happens when the mineral-rich water spills out across the slopes of the limestone mountains. Usually, water would carve channels into the rock, but here, the hillsides grow bigger. So much calcium is deposited on the slopes of the mountain that it forms broad shoals across the valley, often 500 feet wide. To the local Tibetans, water cascading across the shoals is said to look like a shawl of pearls draped across the hillside. The shallow beaches are perfect growing conditions for more than 212 different species of water plants, 410 kinds of algae, and 203 types of fungus. Like everything else in the water, the plants get coated in calcium. One beach is covered with so many small, contorted limestone-covered trees, it's called Bonsai Shoal. Plants even help build waterfalls. First, they act as a giant filter, stopping sand and gravel moving downstream. In most places, it's this abrasive grit that eats into the rim of a waterfall, eroding it back up the valley. But in Jiuzhai, the crystal clear water bounces harmlessly off the rocks. Plants are also built into the waterfalls. As water spills over the top, it accelerates, increasing the rate calcium is deposited onto the rocks and roots, leaves, and branches. The lip of the waterfall becomes a cement-like matrix of plant and limestone, which just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The biggest attraction in the Enchanted Valley is a waterfall over 1,000 feet wide and 65 feet tall. This is the world's widest waterfall made of limestone. It's such a potent symbol of power that Tibetans named it after their god of virility. In fact, all the names in the Enchanted Valley are steeped in Buddhist mysticism. Everywhere you look, you can find the prayers of the people. And they're so spectacular, they've also become a favorite destination for travelers. Despite its extreme isolation, people have been living in the Gio Valley for over 3,000 years. And according to legend, it's all thanks to some very determined sisters. It's said the god of all living things once had 9 smart, brave, beautiful daughters. They were traveling through the mountains when they encountered evil. A snake devil was poisoning the water. But together, the 9 girls defeated the demon. And in the process, they fell in love with the land and the people. The 9 girls went on to marry 9 Tibetan men, created 9 families, and lived in 9 villages along the valley. Which is why the region is called Geological, the Chinese words for 9-village valley. Today, only 7 of the villages remain and are home to about 110 families. In this land of high altitude and low temperatures, life was hard. The people were farmers, growing potatoes and barley, and relied heavily on their herds of horses and yaks. Built on a solid base of stone, their houses have thick insulating walls of rammed earth and are covered in fir shingles. Traditionally, the buildings had 3 stories. Livestock lived on the ground floor, humans in the middle, and food for both was stored on top. The Valley of the 9 Villages is so isolated that the people have developed their own unique Tibetan culture. They speak their own dialect and practice their own sect of Buddhism. Symbols of their religious devotion are spread throughout the Enchanted Valley. Long strings of prayer flags are covered with pictures that promote peace and compassion. Fluttering in the breeze, the wind sets the prayers free. It's a common misconception that the prayers on the flags are aimed at the gods. Instead, the wind carries the messages of goodwill to all living beings in its path. Prayer wheels, large and small, are seen throughout the valley. Each wheel consists of a hollow cylinder containing religious scriptures. Tibetan Buddhists believe that spinning a prayer wheel multiplies their blessings. One spin of the prayer wheel is like reciting a religious chant 100 times. Only 40 years ago, the 9 villages of the Gio Valley were quiet and tranquil havens. Now, things are very different. When the Enchanted Valley opened its doors to paying visitors in 1984, about 5,000 intrepid tourists made the trek into the mountains. But as China's middle class grew, so did the number of visitors. By 2002, more than 1 million people poured into the valley. Now, there can be up to 18,000 visitors a day. They come to see the spectacular landscapes and to visit the main village at the bottom of the valley, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ancient past. Some traditional homes are now shops selling a variety of Tibetan artifacts and souvenirs. After decades of atheist policies, Buddhism is making a comeback in China, and travelers are fascinated by the symbols of devotion. The locals, unable to farm within the national park, now make a living from the tourist trade. The region is famous for its fabrics, hand-woven from flax fibers and embroidered in extraordinary patterns. This swirling traditional dance was once a tribute to love and the harvest. Now it's a great way to promote Tibetan culture. Life has certainly changed for the people of the 9-village valley. Their isolated mountain hideaway is now one of the most popular attractions for travelers in China. Without careful management, the sheer number of visitors could easily destroy the Enchanted Valley forever. For centuries, extreme isolation protected the enchanted valley. But now, with more than 1 million visitors arriving each year, the Gio Valley is under threat. The delicate sculptures of limestone and water took 50,000 years to build, yet pollution and clumsy feet could destroy it in a matter of months. When China's flagship nature reserve was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1992, the government stepped up its efforts to protect this fragile land. Visitors must stay on the many miles of boardwalks, mitigating the effects of thousands of human feet on the delicate water system. Forests remain quiet and tranquil because the only vehicles permitted inside the park are a fleet of 280 buses. No personal transport, not even bicycles, are allowed through the gates. And everybody has to leave the park before sunset. Strangely enough, the same geological turmoil that created the Gio Valley could also destroy it. The pristine lakes could easily be swept away by massive mud and rock flows, triggered by earthquakes. So, high in the hills, the government is constructing massive protective barriers in strategic valleys. Silt and sediments would soon destroy the crystal blue waters, so the surrounding catchments are being carefully monitored and controlled. Flooding is such a threat, the mountains are being extensively replanted, which also serves to increase habitat for endangered species, like the giant panda. And if that fails, there's always room for a little divine intervention. For countless generations, the people of the Enchanted Valley believed that everything under the sun has a soul and a spirit. Unlike most Tibetan Buddhists, here the people worship natural gods. As a result, they have been careful guardians of the land and water. On land, shrines adorned with prayer flags protect unstable cliffs from further slips. And in the water are prayer wheels. Each submerged wheel is constantly turning, and each rotation generates multiple blessings. Water touched by the wheel is said to be sanctified, and as it continues downstream, it carries its purifying power to all life in the valley. Thanks to this careful guardianship, Geological will continue to be the jewel in the crown of China's national parks. And future generations will continue to cherish the beauty of China's most mystic waters.